A great example of using observation in social scientific research is the work by Lynn Loveland on privatizing public space. What she did was in the early 1970s, she went to a bus station and observed in a waiting room. And what she did was she sat down with her notebook and like a fly on the wall observed what was happening around her. And in one of the chapters in this book, A World of Strangers, she writes about how people privatize public space. And she does this using highly detailed descriptions of the people around her. And what I would like you to do is to look in your own city or your own urban or rural place, how people are waiting and how they do this. Because Lynn Loveland describes this in an urban context in the US, and she says people symbolically transform the social situation and they privatize the public space. They create a bubble around them. And it's a symbolic bubble, and this symbolic bubble says, do not interact with me and I won't interact with you. We are all in this urban area, strangers to each other, and in order just to be safe, not have too much contact. Now let's see how this is in the area where you are living. Now let me explain how this is done in Loveland's chapter on privatizing public space. What she does is she uses highly detailed descriptions and she orders those descriptions. For instance, she talks about entrance sequences. And I'm going to show you the entrance sequences. And I'm going to try to describe, not as detailed as Loveland does, but I'm going to describe how this more or less works. How does this sequence look like? Well, before entering a waiting room where other people are seated, people check for readiness. And how do they do this? Well, very often people use a window as a mirror. So what people do is do their hair nicely, or if they don't have hair, they do their shirt properly, they arrange their watch, they tuck their trousers, and so on and so forth. People check themselves for readiness. And when there's a mirror there, it's great, but when there's something else that can work as a mirror, people can do this as well. The second step people take is when they enter the room, they take a reading. And there are different ways or styles or tactics in which you can do this. Well, the first one is the most common one, and that's quick and covert. I just did it. Quick, covert. Quickly look around, even without moving your head, just using your eyes, and then that's it. Quick and covert, taking a reading of a social situation. Where can I sit? What other people are here? Is it scary or not? Well, the second tactic people use is a delaying tactic. So after you checked for readiness and you did your hair, maybe you do your hair again, or you really close the door behind you as part of a delaying tactic, because while closing, you do this quick and covert reading of the room. A third tactic is the tactic of stimuli restriction. You are not focusing on a lot, you're just focusing on a few tiny bits. On your watch, for instance. You watch your watch and at the same time use this quick and covert reading. And the fourth tactic is an interesting one, because that tactic is not often done by people alone. It's usually done by people in groups or in duos. When they're with a partner, then the partner is leading and the other one is following and does not need to do a reading because the other actor is doing the reading for them. The first one does the reading, and then the second one is simply following. So then people are not doing a reading. Now, after taking a reading, you have to go to a place to be seated, or you just stand, and that's a safe tactic as well. But what people do when they want to get seated, they try to reach a position in a certain way. And how do people do this? Again, Lynn Loveland makes a distinction, and what she says is people take a beeline tactic. And a beeline tactic means looking at a spot and taking that spot. So going straight to the spot you want to get seated. And then something else starts, the waiting style. But there's also another way of doing this, and it's the object concentration tactic. When using an object concentration tactic, you focus not on the seat where you are going to, but you focus on something else. You look at the nice painting on the wall, or again, you look at your watch, or at your shoes, or any other stuff, but not around you, and especially not people in the eye. Okay, then you're seated. What then? Well, then, according to Loveland, you have waiting styles. Different styles of waiting. How do people wait? How do people wait in your area? Well, at the bus station of Lynn Loveland, people are waiting in using different styles. And the styles she's focusing on are those three styles. And she says these three styles are not definite, she says. These three styles are just three styles. There can be many, many more. But she describes them pretty detailed. And what she does is she shows how there are certain people that wait like a sweet young thing. And what does a sweet young thing do? Well, a sweet young thing reads a magazine and is focusing on the magazine. And by focusing on that magazine, not looking at the other people, but at the same time, well aware of the other people and probably also well aware of her own position. Now, the second style is the style of the nester. And we all know nesters because nesters are people like this woman here that puts down stuff and open their bags and get all the stuff out and create a little nest around them. And usually they're seated, so they create a space for their own. They symbolically transform the social situation to a private situation. These are my props, so this is my nest. Get out of here. At least that's the secret message, probably. And there's a third style, and that third style is the style of the investigator. And an investigator does this. An investigator investigates stuff that you don't really want to investigate. An investigator investigates screens, walls, signs or something, but usually not that important. And usually an investigator walks around. Why? To wait. But why are they waiting in this way? They are waiting in this way because they are using principles. And by using these highly detailed descriptions of entrance sequences, these highly detailed descriptions of styles, Lynn Loveland is focusing on principles. What kind of principles? Well, principles people in an urban area used when dealing with strangers. And the first principle people use is minimize expressivity. Do not shout, scream, talk loudly, and so on and so forth. Be quiet. Minimize your expressivity. Do not laugh too loud. Do not talk too loud. Do not get angry in public. That's the first. The second principle is minimize body contact. If you touch someone else, say sorry and then move away. At least in the US context. So this is minimize body contact. A third principle is look before you sit. Never get seated next to someone else. No, get seated in the middle. At least that's what's happening in the US. That's what's happening also in the Netherlands. That's what I do when I enter a waiting room. But is it what you do? And is it what people in your area are doing? Might be a cultural thing. Now, the fourth principle is minimize eye contact. Don't look the other person in the eye, unless you know that person. But when it's a stranger, just look casually and then look away again. And if you, by accident, look in the eye, then turn away. The fifth principle is that you have to do something when you're in doubt. When someone is taking two seats, and it's a bit a scary person with a scar, you can go there and ask, could you please move aside so I can sit there? But what usually people do is this. They turn around. They flee. They go sit somewhere else. They look for another spot. Directly. But sometimes you can't flee. So what do you do then? Well, if you can't flee, you disattend. You turn around, you start whistling, start looking at something else. Start doing something else. Leave the others to themselves. Respect their private space. So what does Lynn Loveland do? Well, what she does is she uses highly detailed observations and highly detailed descriptions. And she uses those descriptions in order to show the sequences people take. And obviously, people can take different sequences. Let's observe that in your area. People use different styles. Well, let's observe that in your area. Now, 35 years later, or more even. Let's observe what principles people use. Are they using the same principles or other principles? Can we add some new principles? Because in Lynn Loughlin's work, it seems that it's focused on styles and sequences and principle, but in the end, it's all about what people do with this. That's why you do an observation, in order to say something more theoretically. What are people doing? Well, they're privatizing public space. Now go out and get the seats of your pants dirty in real research and find out how people wait in your area.